Hello everyone, it's Mom Steph right here and welcome to my channel. So for this video is we're going to actually solve those transformable quadratic equations. Ibig sabihin, after na nating matransform to quadratic, isosolve na natin for the values of x or for the roots of those quadratic equations. So ang mangyayari po sa video na to is yun pong mga transformable equations na sinolve po natin sa video na to and ipagpapatuloy ko po to solving the roots of the quadratic equations, which is marami pong nagre-request na sana ay i-continue ko hanggang solving the values of x sa quadratic equation. So yun po yung mangyayari dito. So without further delay, let's start. Number 1 is an example of a rational algebraic equation which is transformable to quadratic equation. So pag sinabing rational, ibig sabihin nun in fraction form. So in number 1, we can see one term which is in fraction form, ang 6 over x. So yung goal natin dito is we need to eliminate the denominator x and then transform that into the standard form of quadratic equation. So to eliminate the denominator x, we need to multiply this side with also x. Bakit? Kasi if we're going to multiply x, that will be multiplied to each term inside this grouping symbol. And the concept that we're going to use here is when a number divided by the same number, that will be equal to 1 or commonly tinatawag nating cancellation method. So, we can cancel this out, kaya mawawala na yung x natin dito once we can cancel. So since we multiplied x to this side, we will also multiply that to the other side of the equation. And then, we will do distributive property or multiply x to each terms inside our grouping symbol. So x times x, that would give us x squared. And this multiplied to our fraction will give us 6x over x. So, eto will be multiplied to 6 lang. And then just copy the denominator. And then sa kabilang side naman, this will be negative 5x. So if ma-observe nyo, sa term na to, common na ang x sa numerator at ang x sa denominator. So i-apply na natin ang concept na to. Therefore, x here can be cancelled out. So we are now left with x squared, eto, plus 6 equals negative 5x. Pero we need to set this into the standard form. So we will just transpose negative 5 to the other side of our equation. So we have x squared as our quadratic term, followed by positive 5x. So from negative, this will become positive once it crosses the equal sign. And then followed by our constant term, 6. And then this side of the equation will become 0 since we already transferred negative 5x to the other side of the equation. And this is now our quadratic equation in standard form. So now that we have our quadratic equation in standard form, we can then proceed if we want to solve for the roots of this equation. So may dalawang method na pwede nating gamitin. Yung una is ang quadratic formula. At yung pangalawa naman ay ang factoring method. So mamimili lang kayo dito kung alin yung mas madali para sa inyo. Now, if you can remember, yung standard form natin ay ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So una natin gagamitin ay ang quadratic formula. So pag gagamitin natin ang quadratic formula, we will then proceed to identifying the values of a, b, and c. Therefore, the value of a is 1. The value of b naman is yung coefficient ng ating linear term, which is positive 5. And the value of c naman is our constant term, which is 6. So let's then proceed to our quadratic formula, which is x equals negative b plus and minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Next, gagawin lang natin is to substitute all these values in our quadratic formula. So we have negative here is 5 plus and minus square root of 5 squared minus 4. Yung A natin is 1. And then yung C natin is 6. And then all over 2 times. So all we need to do now is to simplify this expression in the right-hand side. So we have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of this one. So simplify natin. This is 5 squared. That will be 25 minus 4 times 1 times 6. That is 24 all over 2 times 1, which is 2. Next, we have negative 5 plus and minus square root of 25 minus 4 is just 1. And then square root of 1 ay 1 pa rin all over 2. So, since meron tayong plus and minus dito, we obtain two equations, which is yung first one is negative 5 plus 1 over 2 at yung second one is yung negative 5 minus 1 over 2. Kaya, we obtain here negative 5 plus 1, that will be negative 4 divided by 2. We have negative 2 as our first root. And then, for x sub 2, we have negative 5 minus 1, that will be negative 6 divided by 2. We have negative 3. So with all those solutions, we obtain negative 2 and negative 3 as our root. So now, tingnan naman natin how to use factoring in solving this equation. So we have x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Now for this, we will use the diamond method. So to be able to use diamond method, we will write a big X. Bakit siya tinawag na diamond? Kasi if we're going to do that, parang it's like a diamond. Okay, so what we're going to write in this upper diamond here is yung product ng A at C, which is 6. Okay, so take note that it is positive. And then, sa baba naman is yung B natin, which is positive. So sa dalawang diamonds na to, this will give us the factors, this will give us the hint kung ano yung factors ng ating quadratic equation. So, let's try to find out ano yung factor ng positive 6 na when added will be positive 5. So, ililista natin dito. We have positive 6. Yung factors na pwede ay negative 3 times negative 2. Kasi positive yung result niyan. And when we get the sum, negative 3 plus negative 2, that is negative 5, which is not the same with B. So this is wrong. So now, susubukan natin naman ang positive 3 at positive 2, which is also positive 6. And when we are going to add, will be positive 5. So it's correct. Therefore, ang ilalagay natin dito ay positive 3 and positive 2. Kaya, yung factors natin ay x plus 3 at saka x plus 2. Saan galing yung x dito? So, galing yan sa factor ng first term natin, x times x, or x times x, which is x squared. Okay. Tapos, equals 0. So, now that we have two factors, we will then proceed to using ZPP, or the zero product property. So, for the zero product property, ang mangyayari is, we are going to equate each of these factor to 0. So, we have x plus 3 equals 0. At yung pangalawa naman, x plus 2 equals 0. And then, we will proceed to solving for the value of x. So, we have x equals negative 3. Paano naging negative 3? Just transfer that to the other side of our equation. And then, x equals negative 2. So, comparing the two process, mentally, mas challenging ang factoring. But comparing the two method, mas madali and maiksi yung solution ng factoring. Pero, medyo complicated siya when it comes to identifying the factors. And when it comes to quadratic formula, may formula ka ng magagamit, but mas mahaba yung process. Okay? So that's why my suggestion is if marami kang time, if mahaba pa yung time mo, let's say for example in your quiz or in your assignment, you can do quadratic formula if hindi indicated kung anong method yung gagamitin, if you're allowed to use any method. But if, let's say for example sa quiz, nagmamadali ka, so you can use factoring kasi mas maiksi siya. So now, when it comes to transformable quadratic equations, it is very important that we do the checking. Kasi, hindi all the time na kung ano yung nakuha mong value ng x, yun na yung magiging solution ng equation mo. So now, we will have checking. So yung una nating value ng x na nakuha is negative 3. Now going back to our original equation, which is x plus 6 over x equals negative 5. Okay. So, anong gagawin natin dito sa checking? We will just substitute negative 3 to x's here. So, we have negative 3 plus 6 over negative 3 equals negative 5. So, we have negative 3 plus 6 divided by negative 3, that would be negative 2 equals negative 5. And if we're going to add negative 3 and negative 2, we have negative 5 equals negative 5, which is true. Now, we will check the other one. Yung x equals negative 2. So, we have x plus 6 over x. So, substitute negative 2 plus 6 over negative 2 equals negative 5. And then, we have negative 2 plus 6 divided by negative 2, that is negative 3, equals negative 5. If we're going to add, this is negative 5 equals negative 5, which is still true. So ngayon, masigurado na tayo na itong dalawang to ay yung solutions ng ating quadratic equation, which will lead us to concluding that the solutions of x plus 6 over x equals negative 5 are negative 3 and negative 2. So sa example na to naman, yung denominators natin ay 3x at x squared. Now, ang factors ng 3x ay 3 at saka x. Ang factors naman ng x squared ay x times x. So may common yung dalawa. Yung common na factor sa dalawang denominator na to ay x. Pag nangyari yon, yung may pinakamalaking power yung kukunin natin as the LCD. Kukunin natin ang 3 to eliminate 3. And instead na x lang ang kukunin natin ay x squared. Kasi siya yung may pinakamalaking power. So later on, maka-cancel out din ng x squared yung x dito. So since meron na tayong LCD, multiply na lang natin 3x squared to both sides. So multiply this to the first term here sa numerator. So we have 3x squared times 2x plus 1 over 3x minus 3x squared times x plus 1 over x squared. Sa kabilang side naman, 4 times 3, that will be 12, and then copy x squared. So sa first term dito, common ang 3, so we can cancel out. X squared here means dalawang factors ng x. So, x times x. Therefore, kaya nating i-cancel out yung isang x to eliminate the x in the denominator. So, yung matitira ay yung isang x na lang since na-cancel out na natin to. Okay? So, mawawala na yung second power niya. Next, common ang x squared, parehong x squared, so ang x squared ang cancel out. Tapos, multiply that to these terms. So, x times 2x magiging 2x squared. And x times 1 magiging positive x. Since nawala na ang x squared, we are now left with negative 3 kasi minus sign dito. So, negative 3 times x magiging negative 3x. And negative 3 times 1 here magiging negative 3 equals 12x squared. So, ang gagawin natin ngayon is to transpose 12x squared to the other side. So, magiging 2x squared. Katabi niya ang like term which is negative 12x squared. And then, positive x minus 3x minus 3 equals 0. So, combining like terms tayo, 2x squared minus 12x squared, this is negative 10x squared. And then, ito naman, like terms, positive x minus 3x magiging negative 2x minus 3 equals 0. So, ito na ang ating quadratic equation in standard form.
So, in my previous video, I stopped with this quadratic equation and said that this is already a quadratic equation in standard form. And some are asking if matatawag ba siyang standard form if the value of a, which is itong katabi ng x square, is a negative number. Well, my response would be yes, because going back to the definition of our standard form of a quadratic equation, the coefficients a, b, and c are real numbers. So pag sinabing real numbers, ang ibig sabihin niyan, these are numbers that are positive and negative numbers and including 0. Now, may restriction lang tayo when it comes to a. Kasi yung a natin na coefficient hindi dapat maging 0. Kasi pag naging 0 yon, mawawala yung quadratic term natin. So, yung b and c lang ang pwedeng maging 0. Yun lang yung restriction natin sa ating quadratic equation. So, I stopped there kasi yung purpose lang naman ng video is to transform these equations into quadratic equations and set them into standard form. Pero if we wish to solve the quadratic equation, maaari po nating gawing positive itong a kasi para sa akin mas madali lang siyang isolve pag positive yung a natin. So to make this positive, we will just multiply both sides with negative 1. So, hindi naman tayo nag-violate ng rule kasi ang ginagamit lang naman natin dito is multiplication property of equality. That means, whatever we multiply on one side of the equation, we will also use that and multiply it to the other side of our equation. So, what we will do now is to multiply negative 1 to every term in our quadratic equation. So, this will now become positive 10x squared, and then negative 1 times negative 2, that becomes positive 2x, and then positive 3 equals 0 pa rin. So now, to solve for the roots of our quadratic equation, we will then choose a method that can solve this equation. And for this case, we are going to choose quadratic formula. Bakit quadratic formula? Because yung coefficient ng a natin dito is malaki. And looking at our quadratic equation, it is not factorable. So, to make our lives easier, we will use the quadratic formula. So, our quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, now going back to our quadratic equation, since quadratic formula yung gagamitin natin, we will first identify the values of a, b, and c. Okay, so since naka-standard form na siya, mas madali na lang nating i-identify. So for the value of coefficient a, that will be 10. For the value of coefficient b, that will be 2. And for the value of c, that is 3. So let's just plug in. We have x equals, that would be negative 2 plus and minus square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 10 times 3. Okay. Tapos all over 2 times 10. Okay, then we will simplify. So that's x. So we have here negative 2 plus and minus square root of 2 square, that will be 4, minus 4 times 10, that's 40. 40 times 3, that would be 120 all over 20. Okay, so right now, before we proceed, tingnan muna natin yung radical natin dito. If we're going to subtract 4 minus 20, the result will be square root of negative 116, which is, masasabi nating not real. Kasi walang square root ng negative number. So, instead of proceeding to our solution, we can conclude that the quadratic equation has no real solution, and consequently, yung equation natin na 2x plus 1 over 3x minus x plus 1 over x squared equals 4 has no real solution as well. So the same with the previous example, if we wish to solve this quadratic equation, we first multiply both sides by negative 1 to make our coefficient A positive. Kasi mas madali lang kung positive siya. So the result would be positive x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals 0. So for this, I will choose to use factoring kasi the value of A is just 1 and madali lang siyang i-factor using the diamond method by just drawing big X. So here, the product, which is 16 or positive 16, and the sum or our B, which is negative 8. And then I will just look for the factors of 16 that when added is negative 8. Since 16 is positive, posibleng parehong positive yung factors niya or parehong negative. Now, since negative yung sum, therefore, we are sure that both numbers are negative. Kasi negative times negative, that's positive. And when we're going to add negative and a negative number, the result is negative. So on this side, let us list down the factors of 16. And on this side is the sum. Okay, so yung factors ng positive 16 is pwedeng negative and negative 1. Okay, now if we're going to add negative 16 plus negative 1, the sum would be negative 17, which is not the same with negative 8. Now, if I choose negative 4 times negative 4, the product is still positive 16, and if I'm going to add, the result will be negative 8, which is correct. Okay, which is the same with our B here. So, I am now sure na yung factors na gagamitin ko ay negative 4 times negative 4. So, this equation can be factored x minus 4 and x minus 4 equals 0. So, if you observe, magkapareho lang yung dalawang factors ng ating equation, ng ating quadratic equation. So, ibig sabihin, pag pareho lang yung factor, this is a perfect square trinomial. Okay? So, I can rewrite this one into x minus 4 squared equals 0. And this time, I want to get rid of this exponent. So what I'm gonna do is to apply extracting the square root. So by extracting the square root, that means I'm going to get the square root of both sides. So this will be canceled out. And I'm left with x minus 4 equals 0. Of course, we will not put positive and negative kasi yung 0 is a neutral number. It doesn't have any sign. Hindi siya integer. Okay, so then to get the value of x, we will just transfer negative 4 to the other side. So we have positive 4 as our root or solution of this quadratic equation. Now, to be sure if this is really our solution, we need to do checking. So, we will check if x equals 4 is really a solution of our equation 8 over x equals 2 over x minus 2 plus 1. So, we will just substitute 4. So, we have 8 over 4 equals 2 over 4 minus 2 plus 1. Simplifying, we have 8 divided by 4, that's 2, equals 2 over 4 minus 2, that would be 2 over 2 plus 1. Or we have 2 equals 1, kasi 2 divided by 2 is just 1, plus 1. Or if we proceed here, we have 2 equals 2, which is true. So for our conclusion, we can say that 8 over x equals 2 over x minus 2 plus 1. Solution x equals 4.